Hello there again. I wanted to do a brief presentation that discusses primary research. So maybe you have a little bit better understanding about the methods of primary research, what they entail, and how to go about doing them. So primary research, you should hopefully know by now, is that it's the method you use to gather your own data, your articles and all that good stuff, or secondary research. Now you're going to get into your primary research. So common methods of primary research: interviews, focus groups, surveys, case studies, and observations. And for our purposes, we're going to talk specifically about interviews and surveys. If you are going to do a focus group or a case study or observations, there is a lot of information on the internet for you, or you can send me an email and we can discuss some more specific ideas about that. One note about primary research, especially interviews, surveys, those kinds of things, these are very common in the social sciences. You'll probably, if you're in the social sciences, so like psychology or sociology or whatever, you might do a fair amount of primary research in your college career. So get used to it, I guess, is what I'm saying. So, first, interviews. When do you do an interview? Interviews are good at getting in depth information from a small number of people. And also, if you need more personal interaction, you can ask a question and you can ask a follow up question based on that question, or you can let your conversation go in a whole new way or a whole different way than what you had planned with an interview. That doesn't really work so much with a survey. Um, Interviews, I should also say, and I think I've said this before, it gets good, deep information from a small number of people. So, how to do an interview: prepare for your interview, select your subjects, figure out who you're going to ask and why. Make sure you have your research question defined, and then figure out who you're gonna ask these questions to. Write your questions down. Come up with very specific questions related to your study. Keep your research question in mind while you're trying to make up your interview questions to make sure that you um, are asking the right questions to get the right answers. Make sure you come up with your questions really carefully. Otherwise, your interview could fall flat. And the problem with interviews is that you really only get one shot to do it. If you really mess up an interview, a lot of times you can't really redo that. One point: use open ended questions and try not to lead your interviewees. So don't say things like, I think this is bad. Do you think it's bad? Obviously, that's kind of leading the person that you're asking a question to. So once you do all that, conduct your interviews. You can have one on one interviews or a group of interviews. A group of interviews could also be considered a focus group. Each one of these types has its advantages. One on one interviews are good, especially if you're asking sort of sensitive information. Group interviews are great if you want people to play off of each other's thoughts, or you think maybe one person's answer might spur another person to have a different answer or different thoughts. Bring a recording device if you don't feel comfortable taking notes or you don't think you'll remember what is said. And come prepared. Bring your notes, your paper, your computer, whatever it is you need to do it. Try to make casual talk. Don't just sit there and start peppering them with questions. Hey, how are you doing? How's your day? Blah, blah, blah. Don't intimidate your interviewees. Most of your interviewees are probably going to be your friends. So hopefully that won't be a big uncomfortable situation for you, but just try to make them comfortable. Remember to ask your questions, but remember that if the interview starts to go in a direction maybe that you didn't foresee, but it might be more interesting than what you were going to ask, let it happen. Go ahead and let it do that. Because sometimes that's the way we get really good research. Surveys then. Why do you do surveys? How do you do a survey? Surveys are the best way to get information from a large group of people. So you get a breadth of information, which means like a wide amount of information, but not a lot of deep information. Surveys are best if your answers to the research questions are data driven. So you can answer it with a percentage or a number. 47% of people don't read romance novels, or whatever the question is. Obviously, you can use survey tools easily anymore to reach remote subjects. There's lots of different survey tools available. SurveyMonkey. I am a big fan of Google Forms. You can just make up your own form. It's free. You don't have a limit to how many you can do. You just send the link and people can do it that way. And there's lots of other ways to do it too. How do you do a survey? Figure out how many people you want to survey, how you're going to survey them. In my experience, and I don't know if this is a hard and fast rule, usually you get about a third back of what you send out. So if you really want 20 people to answer a survey, you should probably think around sending it out to 50 or 60 people. Always send to more than what you think you're going to want the responses from. Write your questions carefully when you write your survey questions. You can include demographic data like gender, age, that kind of thing, but usually you should make it optional, so people feel comfortable answering questions, especially if there's a lot of identifying information in the survey. This is an important one. Keep in mind that people are more willing to engage in easy answers. So you want to try to keep the answers to your survey simple and selectable. I would try to stay away from a lot of like fill in the blank answers. If you have a lot of fill in the blank answers where the person's going to have to write or talk for a while, I would maybe go with an interview instead of a survey. One way that you can get at a lot of easy answers, or like very clickable answers, is the Likert scale. You might have heard of the Likert scale before if you're in the social sciences, but you've definitely seen it before. This is an example of the Likert scale. It usually uses 5 to 7 options, and they go from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So you can either have 7 with 3 on each side and 3 on each side, or 5 with 2 on each side of neither. There are plenty of forms and formats of the Likert scale available if you just Google it. And this is a good way to kind of standardize surveys, and people are really comfortable with this because most people have seen it before. So it's a good way to kind of structure your answers. So here's some more links for the Likert scale. I'll put these on the research project page so you can click them and see them more easily. A few points about developing your questions for either a survey or an interview. Keep your questions to the point. Try to use shorter and more pointed questions. Don't ramble. Like I said before, don't ask biased questions. And try not to ask double-barreled questions. So try to make sure you only have one question per point. So if you're doing a survey or an interview, don't try to ask a question that's actually getting at 2 different responses. Keep it to just one response. There's a bunch of links here for further information. I will put those on the research project page. One thing that I will say is if you're trying to do interviews or a focus group or even a survey, people really respond to food, especially in college, right? Tell your friends that you'll buy them pizza. Take them to, KU and get them a pizza, or order Papa John's or whatever it is, Cousin Vinny's. And just, order pizza and feed them while they're there, and they're probably going to be more likely to come. That's a good way. I just did a bunch of focus groups, and I did the exact same thing. I offered people lunch, and people came to get the lunch, and they didn't really care what I was asking. They just came. And this is faculty. This is not even students. So that's a kind of a good rule of thumb to follow. So if you have any questions, please let me know about primary research, that you should be starting your primary research, and hopefully this presentation has helped you a little bit figure out the direction for your primary research and what kinds of things you're going to ask and how you're going to do it. Thank you.